became truly global in 1977 when it decided to support museums in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And ever since 1977, ICOM has been organizing International Museum Day, which is like a beacon pointing towards future action for international museum community. And the celebration of this day worldwide every year highlights that museums are an important means of cultural exchange, enrichment of culture, and development of mutual understanding, cooperation and peace among people. The first time ICOM suggested a theme for International Museum Day was in 1992. The theme was Museum and Environment. And ever since it has been given themes and encouraging museums to celebrate it worldwide. Museums, museum profession and museum practice came into being much before than the academic discipline of museology. In fact, museology is the last to come. First was museum, then museography, and then museology. Museology as a discipline is as interdisciplinary as its field, the museum, and it bears the primary responsibility to define the future of museum, its relationship with the society and people, and its ever-changing relevance. If we go to etymology, then etymologically speaking, museology is the study of museum. And as per the most commonly used definition, it is an applied science, the science of museum, which studies its history, its role in society, the specific form of research and physical conservation, activities and dissemination, organization and functioning, new or musealized architecture, sites that have been received or chosen, its typology and its deontology. The term museography appeared first in section in the early 18th century, where it is defined as the understanding concerning the establishment of museums. Currently, it is defined as practical or applied aspect of museology, the techniques which have been developed to fulfill museum operations. The word museography and museums may exhibit different textured meanings and implications according to the principle and criteria with which they are brought to life or existence in each location or time period. Museum changes with time period. Museology has to catch up with this change and provide the way ahead. As museums are becoming more broad-based and diverse, the museological studies recognize the museum as a dynamic instrument of changing scenario based on interdisciplinary work also. Coming to India, in India the museum is a colonial construct, we are all aware, which was instituted in a ready-made fashion from a top-down approach. It didn't organically grow from the society like in the West. We are aware that the history of museums in India is now more than 200 years old. In 1936, when the first and the only ever comprehensive survey of the museums and art galleries in India, that is the undivided British India, the modern day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and also Burma, Myanmar, was done by S.F. Markham and H. Hargreaves, there were 105 museums in India. It is mentioned that in the preface of the report of the word, museum has been used for those collections which were open to public and also to some of the university museums, which were open to certain sections of public. During the time of the survey, the number of museums in Great Britain and other Ireland was 730. In Germany, 1,700, in the United States, 1,400, in France, 650, in Italy, 420. The survey report critically examines all functions of the museum as understood at that time: collection and preservation, interpretation, educational, facilities and research. The part 2 of the survey report consists of a directory of museums of India where information on all 105 existing museums has been given: opening hours, general description, scope and collection, publication, educational activities, staff, finance, etc. I have given this reference as a comparison to what we understand museology and museum functions haven't changed in practice much. With the attainment of independence in 1947, India entered into a new phase of museum movement, and under the Constitution of India, museums have been placed in the state list, indicating that the primary responsibility of setting up museums and maintaining them is on the states. Today, as per the Directory of Indian Museums 2023, there are 1,200 museums, which are very less considering that we are the largest democracy in the world and we are one of the most diverse and multicultural societies. We need to have more museums, but the good news is that there are more than ever number of museums being set up in India today, both by communities, by private sector, by private initiatives, and by government. There has been a significant growth in the number and types of museums. It's all around us, but because there's a growing realization and self-consciousness which is there among the people of the need to preserve cultural heritage alongside balancing the pressures of modern needs. There are many schemes by the Government of India which promote the setting up of museums, like the Museum Grant Scheme, for digitization of museum collections, for safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage. Museologists today have professional obligation to study, explore and analyze the changing role and functions of museum in safeguarding and representing heritage vis-a-vis the fast-changing cultural landscape challenges of today's world, visitors and communities. In present times, there is an urgent need to upgrade museological theories, practice and research so that the requirements of the museum can be fulfilled and the positions which are there can be repurposed and repositioned. We are all aware that the museology course in India started in 1952. In fact, this department was the third one to come up after Baroda and then Calcutta and then BHU. Coming to a very important aspect which has changed the dimension, the way we look at museums is intangible cultural heritage. And it's because of the intangible cultural heritage that today we are talking about community participation and we are talking about inclusion. UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage was brought in 2003 and it has changed and challenged the field of museology and the perceived functions of museums ever since. In the revision of the definition in 2007 in Vienna Conference, where the word intangible cultural heritage was added for the first time, the mandate of museums was redefined to include ICH in all its functions, and for the format of documentation and archiving of cultural heritage has been changed for it. Now, this is something which has challenged and changed the field of museology and the perceived functions of museums. The latest definition not only retains intangible cultural heritage as a function and as a collection to be dealt with, but is expanded to incorporate and imbibe the values attached to ICH. ICH resides with people, and because it resides with people, this inclusion has revolutionized and changed the role and functions of museums completely. Cultural heritage is preserved and safeguarded by museums and other such organizations, and as lived, carried on and sustained by people, demand greater collaboration and partnership between museums, cultural organizations, community and people. The cultural landscape is shifting and changing shape all over. This move is not limited to only physical shifting, but is a move away from traditional way of life, continuity of culture, roots, identity and heritage. Objects left behind in physical form may survive the forces of nature and the ravages of time and other struggles to reach to us in some form. But cultural way of life, traditions, oral history, folk tales and many more such ICH forms may not be so tenacious. India ratified the Convention of Intangible Cultural Heritage in 2005. And so far there are 14 nominations which are all in the representative list. There are two lists, you are aware of a list for urgent safeguarding and a list for which is representative. But for a country with such diversity, we need more nominations in the UNESCO list and we need a solid database of intangible cultural heritage. Now, museums are not just repositories of the past, as I have said before, they are dynamic spaces. And this space, as we all know, is undergoing change, it's undergoing a shift. But despite this growing realization about the significance of museums, there remains a notable gap in the ability to engage diverse audiences. And while there is digital transformation happening and it holds a great potential and promise, offering wider accessibility, it also presents significant challenges. Challenges in terms of judicious use. Either you see museums being completely static or you see museums being completely overrun by digital gimmicks. Technology capacity is not there, financial resources are not there, and expertise definitely is lacking at the moment for it. There is also the challenge of ensuring that museums avoid reinforcing colonial narratives. The decolonization of museums is an ongoing process which will take time, but it has started. Museum, as I've said before, is an institution which has uniqueness of being different things to different people in different times, and we have to realize the need of the time today. Coming from the Indian Institute of Heritage, where I head the Department of Museology, and there in the Department of Museology, we have been trying to do a lot of action research projects to understand the changing needs of the museums so that that can be brought into the theories of museology which are being taught. Not everything needs to originate from the West. And as many programs which we do there with the dual purpose of both teaching students about the practical applicability and feasibility of cultural study theories, but also to discover new areas of academic research for Indian conditions. We have been working with communities across India. And two projects which have been run on intangible cultural heritage documentation in Ladakh and Arunachal have resulted in community museums. And I will talk a bit about that. And if possible, if the PPT works, I will show some pictures also. And Department of Museology, IIH, as part of its research mandate, has been working on the documentation of intangible cultural heritage of different regions of India, including Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. Now, interesting thing happened that the discussion and documentation on ICH in Ladakh led to people sharing objects also which had not been seen by younger generation for very long. Then they expressed a desire, people in this particular village called Gya Sasuma, they expressed a desire for a small museum in the local school or a new community center. The process involved community conducting documentation, we had to do that training. They also, together with them, we did preservation, understanding their traditional techniques and taking our techniques to them. And then the display. And it was a very meaningful partnership. A community museum was inaugurated in Gya Sasuma in 2022. The entire collection of the museum is donated by villages, and the house in which, the building in which the museum is set up also belongs to the villages. Objects were collected through a collection workshop drive. Documentation, display, and interpretation was done involving the community, and the display was done by the villagers. Showcased in the museum are traditional utility items, textiles and dresses, manuscripts, antiquities from everyday life, and some religious objects. The museum also displays and interprets the traditional Ladakhi house and its various architectural spaces and features, and the use of each of these in Ladakhi life. And the ICH of Gaya Sasuma is showcased through audiovisual mediums in the museum through certain films which have been made, including the villages. Now, it is a deconstructed notion of a museum by a group of people, most of whom have never been to a museum. It is being visited now for 2 years by local students from nearby villages and from all over Ladakh. There is a good flow of tourists, both national and international. Another, a nomadic museum, is slated to be inaugurated in Kalkyam this May. It is the nomadic zone, very remote. It is interesting that the ICH in these places is becoming a catalyst for the community to grasp and approach the tangible collection and the idea of the museum and archives. Because for the community, tangible object collection archives are abstract, while ICH is concrete. And it is in this context of ICH that the objects are finding new meaning as heritage objects. In yet another research action project done in Arunachal Pradesh, a community museum was inaugurated in October 2024. Now, you're all aware that Arunachal Pradesh is situated in northeastern frontiers of India, and it has very diverse cultural and natural heritage that spans thousands of years. The strategic location of Arunachal Pradesh amidst Himalayas and its proximity to international borders has historically facilitated trade, migration, and cultural exchange, making it a crucial nexus connecting Indian subcontinent with Southeast Asia and beyond. In order to preserve, document, and represent the rich cultural heritage, in a place called Kaming, which is just before Tamang, when you go to Tamang, the Department of Museology, Indian Institute of Heritage, in collaboration with the local communities, state administration, and invaluable contribution by Indian Army, has conceptualized, curated, and set up Kaming Cultural and Heritage Museum in the West Kaming region near the Nipmanong War Memorial. Set up with the participation, contribution, and active support of local communities who donated 353 objects absolutely free of cost, including their manuscripts, including their jewelry, and including their religious objects also. Both in thought and process, the collection exercise, the museum carries the ethos of community participation, sustainability and inclusivity in its process, and its exhibition and public program. The ethnographic collection of the museum represents all communities of West Namic region, Monpa, Meji, Shabdutlan, Bugan, Aka, Sartan. Majority of collection of the Kaming Museum comprises personal belongings, family heirloom, treasures donated by the people, archival and historical objects of valor and sacrifice contributed by Indian Army, and the natural history, flora and fauna of the region. Each item tells a story, and together the collection weaves the fabric of a community that is proud of its past and hopeful for its future. Now, Kaming Cultural Heritage Museum has the potential to become a model for community-centered museum projects. This project was finished in a record time of 11 months, but we had the advantage of experience from the museum which we set up in Ladakh, which took a longer time. The museum showcases a diverse collection, and we have covered in 6 themes: the geography and natural heritage, history and heritage, archaeology, Buddhism, cultural heritage and ethnic communities, and we have also talked about sustainable heritage because they have so much to give, and the role and contribution of Indian Armed Forces. In closing, I encourage all of us to continue thinking critically about the challenges and possibilities before us. As museology evolves and as museums change, they have to complement each other, they need to have a closer dialogue. They have to integrate newer approach such as community involvement, interdisciplinary engagement, use of technology, judicious use of technology, and the relationship has to grow deeper. Museologists cannot work in their own silos and museums in their own museum work. They have to come together to make museums really meaningful for the society. And when I say society, they have to look into the needs of the society they're functioning in. So let's hope that museums can bring the change and be very relevant to the changing India which we are there. Thank you.